Now, in this lesson, we have about 5 subtopics. System, what is the structure and function, productivity, decomposition, energy flow, and ecological pyramids. So, firstly, what is an ecosystem? Okay, living and non-living things which are interacting. Do you know the scientific word for this? Living and non-living is when you use for smaller
Abiotic and
classes. Biotic and abiotic. Biotic factors are the living factors. Abiotic factors are the non-living factors or the non-living things. So basically, what you have in an ecosystem is the biotic factors and the abiotic factors are interacting with each other. That is nothing but an ecosystem, and this will take place within a particular area. So scientifically, you can write it as a functional unit of nature where the living organisms interact among themselves. So basically, the biotic factors, that is the living organisms. Right? So these are the biotic factors. They will interact among themselves. So living organisms interacting among themselves. And they will also interact with the surrounding physical environment, which is nothing but the abiotic factors. So these are your environment around you is the abiotic factors. So biotic organisms interacting with each other and with the abiotic factors in a given space is called as an ecosystem. An ecosystem will vary greatly in size from a pond to even a large forest or a sea. It can be of varying sizes. Now, because it becomes really difficult, if you think of it, even Earth is an ecosystem because you have biotic factors interacting with each other as well as with the abiotic factors, but it becomes very difficult to study the Earth as a whole. Therefore, just for our convenience or for our ease, we have put them into two basic categories. You have terrestrial and you have aquatic ecosystems. So terrestrial is nothing but the land ecosystem, and you have aquatic, which is nothing but the water ecosystems. So terrestrial is for land and aquatic is basically water. Now, what are the different ecosystems that different areas that come under terrestrial ecosystems? Remember some examples here. So forest, grasslands, deserts, all of these will come under terrestrial ecosystem, basically land ecosystems. And then you have pond, lake, wetland, you have rivers, you have estuaries. All this will come under aquatic ecosystems. So what you see over here is basically an ecosystem that you see. This is one particular area over here. You can see certain living things over here, basically biotic things. For example, you can see some insects, you can see animals over here. You have some bacteria, planktons, protozoans, all of these. What are the abiotic factors here? Anything that you can think of here. What about the sun? The sunlight over here. So there's going to be some sort of temperature differences. All of those will come under abiotic factors. So what do you do in an aquarium? We have set it up like that, right? We have given it a defined boundary inside which we put some sort of plants. You're going to put some stones. You're going to fill it up with water. You can also have a irrigation unit which will produce some sort of oxygen inside. That is also abiotic factors. And then the fish that you put in, plants that you put in, these are the biotic factors, right? So one example of a man-made ecosystem is an aquarium. Can you think of one more? Botanical gardens, an agricultural field. Set it up. You give it certain nutrients, certain environment. You give a particular boundary to it that, oh, this is my crop field or this is my agricultural field, right? And you're going to be growing some certain types of crops over there. Right? So again, a crop field is also a man-made ecosystem. These are some examples. Crop fields. Now, this is the first part of the lesson, which is ecosystem, the structure and function. Now, you've just seen what are the various components of the environment. You have some abiotic factors and you have some biotic factors which make up the environment. We also have something called as the vertical distribution of different species. And when they occupy different levels, we give it a name called as stratification. Okay, strata is nothing but different levels. And stratification is this distribution of the species across these different levels. For example, if you look at this, this is nothing but think of maybe a forest ecosystem or a forest stratification. So what happens over here? You're going to be having trees or basically plants of various different, what do you say, sizes. You're going to have tall trees. You're also going to have very short trees or plants or shrubs. So trees will occupy the topmost layer, the vertical strata or the topmost layer of the forest. Below that, you're going to have the shrubs, which are going to be shorter. And then you have herbs and grasses, which are even more shorter. So they will occupy the lowest or the bottommost layer, the ground layer. So basically, what has happened here is you have stratified or you have basically divided or vertically distributed the different species in different levels. The topmost layer is the emergent layer. Then you have a canopy layer. Usually below the canopy layer, you will also have a sub canopy layer. You have understory layer. Then you have a shrub layer and you have the ground layer for the very tiny grasses. So this entire ecosystem has been stratified. What is stratification? It is a vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels. And you can give example of a forest stratification. Now, the components of the ecosystem are seen to function as a unit when you consider the following aspects. What do I mean by this? If I want this ecosystem to function as a well-oiled machine, in the sense all the parts over here are functioning properly and as a collective unit, it is all smooth. I need certain aspects that have to be in place. What are these certain components? First thing is the productivity. Okay, it's basically the input. What is the production taking place over there? What is the input that I am getting in this particular ecosystem? Then I have decomposition, which is the output, basically the end result. Then there's something called as energy flow. That is, how is energy flowing amongst the various abiotic and biotic factors in the ecosystem. So basically transfer of energy across various levels of species of that particular ecosystem. Then there's something called as nutrient cycling. It's basically the transfer of nutrients again across the ecosystem, that is across maybe biotic, abiotic factors and different levels. Okay, how are these nutrients being transferred and in what form are they being transferred? So if I have all these four components of the ecosystem, then the ecosystem will function together as one unit. Now let us take an example of an aquatic ecosystem. Okay, we're taking the example of a pond over here. Now in a pond, what are the various abiotic components that you're going to see? First thing and the main thing, major thing here is the water of the pond. What is that going to be? It's going to have all your dissolved inorganic and organic substances. It's going to have various minerals. It's going to have different organic substances. All of this will be present in the water. And right at the bottom of the pond, okay, what are you going to have? There's going to be a rich soil deposit as well. So this is going to be the main abiotic components in a pond ecosystem: water and the rich soil deposit. Now, apart from that, what are the other abiotic components? You have the solar input. So obviously there's the sun or the sunlight that is there. So that's the solar input. The cycle of temperature. So depending on what is the weather or what is the season over there, the temperature is going to vary in the pond. If it's very cold, even the pond temperature is going to reduce. If it's a very hot and humid day, naturally the temperature is going to rise. Then the day length. Day length in the sense days are longer during summer, shorter during the night. So what is the length of the day? What is the period? Then you have other climatic conditions as well that will regulate the rate of function of the entire pond. Rate is nothing but the speed of function. How are the things basically functioning within that entire pond? So main abiotic components, water and soil. Apart from that, you have the solar input, temperature, day length and other climatic conditions. What are the autotrophic components of this pond? Autotrophic means the ones that basically are the producers, the organisms which make their own food. So in this case, you have the phytoplanktons, you have some algae, then you have some floating or submerged marginal plants that are found on the edges of the pond. So all of these are autotrophic components, which means they are making their own food. That means that they can carry out photosynthesis. So these are the producers in the pond. They can carry out photosynthesis, make their own food, and they are the producers. Now, what about the consumers? These are the zooplankton. Zooplankton is nothing but the animals. Okay, phytoplanktons is nothing but the plants. So zooplanktons, then you have some free swimming and bottom dwelling forms. There'll be some sort of small swimming organisms, the ones that are going to be towards the bottom of the pond. So these are the consumers. What do you think these consumers are going to consume? What are they feeding? Primary producers. Which are the primary producers? Phytoplanktons, algae, all of those are the producers. So the consumers can feed on the producers. That is what they do, and sometimes they will also on other consumers as well. Okay, depending on the size, the larger ones may feed on the smaller ones. What about decomposers? You have some fungi, bacteria, and flagellates, especially abundant in the bottom of the pond. So these will feed on the dead and the decaying matter. So they will decompose. What are flagellates? So flagella is basically, it's a whip kind of a structure that is present on certain organisms to help them move or swim, right? So let us say if you have maybe a bacterial cell, just a second. Yeah, let us say you have like a bacterial cell here, okay, and if you have a flagella like this here, this is the flagella, it will help in the movement of this bacteria. So what does flagella indicate? It indicates that that organism is motile. It can move from one place to another place. You can think of it as a whip-like structure. Okay, so what is it? This is a whip-like structure, is a flagella. Okay, so it helps in movement or locomotion from one place to the other. Gayatri, we just started with a new chapter, ecosystem chapter, okay, and we've just finished a small bit of it. So we're basically doing the aquatic ecosystem. We're seeing the pond, what are the abiotic, biotic factors. We've seen what autotrophs are present, consumers and decomposers are present in the pond. Okay, now if you look at this, this is the image of a pond ecosystem. Okay, basically a pond. If you look at this over here, you will be able to see that there are some sort of producers over here, producers or the autotrophic component. Phytoplanktons, you will see some algae, some sort of plants that are present around the edges. There are some plants over here, right? Across the edges over here. Okay, then you have some other smaller plants as well at the bottom over here. Some sort of algae floating. Okay, all of these are producers. You can also see some consumers over here. Some, what do you say? Not plants, sorry. Animals that are there, right? Some zooplanktons, there's fish, all of those. And then you can, I don't think you can see the, sorry. I don't think you can see the decomposers as such, but all of this makes up the plant ecosystem. And here, what are we talking about? What's the abiotic component that we said? The major one is going to be the water and the mineral rich soil over it. Then we have conversion of, within this pond itself. Okay, how are the inorganic materials going to be converted into the organic material? This happens with the help of radiant energy of the sun. Okay, so basically you have the solar energy. So what will the autotrophs do? They will use this energy and they are going to convert the inorganic material into organic material. Okay, what happens in photosynthesis? What is the equation for photosynthesis? Basically utilizing light. What is synthesis? Synthesis is to make something or to produce or generate something. So utilizing light to synthesize something. So what is this particular thing? You have CO2 photosynthesis. So you have CO2, which is the carbon dioxide, and you have water. This in the presence of this radiant energy of the sun, which is nothing but the sunlight. I'll just write it as light. This is going to now produce some organic material, right? What is this? This is the glucose or the carbohydrate that we spoke about. Okay. Plus you will have, again, there'll be some water and oxygen released, which we breathe. Correct? This is the entire equation for photosynthesis. So you can take some inorganic material and then convert it into organic material with the help of sunlight, and this is done by autotrophs. These are the producers. Then the next thing that happens is The autotrophs will be consumed by the heterotrophs. Who are the heterotrophs? Heterotrophs are the consumers that we saw over here. This group. Consumer group is nothing but heterotrophs. So what do heterotrophs do? They do not make their own food. Rather, they will depend on the autotrophs for their food. Right? So that's the next thing. Once the autotrophs have made the food, the heterotrophs will feed on the autotrophs. Then next, what do you have? You have decomposition and mineralization of the dead material or dead matter to release them back for reuse by the autotrophs. Okay, so what do the autotrophs do? They will require some sort of minerals to carry out this inorganic to organic conversion. So all of this, where are they getting all these things from? It's because of the decomposers. What do the decomposers do? Who are the decomposers? You have fungi, bacteria, some flagellated organisms, right? All of these will decompose the dead matter. They will mineralize the dead matter, and whatever is remaining over here, that will be reused by the autotrophs to make the food again. So it's basically like a cycle. Now remember, this is unidirectional movement of energy towards the higher trophic levels. So you would have heard of the trophic levels. You have producers, consumers, decomposers, your primary consumers, tertiary consumers, all of that. So basically, it's a unidirectional flow or unidirectional movement of energy. What does that mean? As you go higher and higher in the trophic levels, the energy is also going to be moving in the similar direction. So it's not a bi-directional thing. As you go higher, the energy also keeps increasing. Just one direction. Okay.